Greetings folks, today I'm going to be painting up a Gloomwraith Stalker from Age of Sigmar's Nighthaunt faction as a Spirit of Wrath for a upcoming D&D session where I'm going to be using this guy after a puzzle to face off my opponents. Well, players. Might as well call them opponents though in this case. This particular model I actually quite enjoy a lot with the whole undead, like spirit of death feel it has, alongside the nice addition of a horse skull and a skeletal hands it has here. The blade in particular is actually a very neat design. Now to start things off, I'm actually going to be painting the blade first. I'm going to be using a... where is it? A Reaper series paint, which is called Tan Skin. The tan skin I'm going to apply to the... The tan skin I'm going to apply to the base of the weapon first before I start making it darker with a nice shade of Seraphim Sepia, and then probably a nice dry brush of a darker brown or tan skin. Get a nice like wooden feel to it. Just as the base colors before we get into a lot of fire effects later on with this guy. Just going to get my medium brush I have right here, and then we're going to apply some of the paint to that section. Now if you get some on the hands or the cloak, that is totally fine. We will be touching up those later in the first place, which is why we wanted to start with the weapon. Just give it a little bit of paint here, paint it there. Paint it here. Right, we're going to give that about a minute to dry, and then we'll get back to the rest of it. Now that that is dry, we'll be using a little bit of Citadel's base Wraithbone and dry brushing it onto the weapon. This will help define the outer features of the weapon itself and give it a little bit of definition, so that way the darker colors underneath can really pop compared to the dry brushing. We're just going to do it lightly here. Now with the Seraphim Sepia shade, it's not completely dry yet, which is totally fine, because the dry brushing here will give it this nice mottled effect and push the paint a little bit towards the back end of the weapon. Now with that done, we will be heading to the blade portion of this. Before we begin our nice kind of burning effect at the end of the blade, like heated metal, we are going to be dry brushing again, but this time with an Iron Breaker layer paint from Citadel's paint series. This will help give it a nice defined bright color. And it will start giving us a nice little metallic metal look, so that way we can see it underneath the colors we will be applying to the top of it. So I dry brush from the edge and then upwards onto all the metal parts. Now you want to be soft with the dry brushing on this end of the spear, because it is a very flimsy part of the model with it being so thin. And I dry brush it only from the bottom edge and the top of the edge, so that way straight through the middle we can still see a little bit of our black. It's almost a nice little way of cheating with a non-metal color. Now, sorry if part of the video here is a little upside down. Earlier, was working on the project here and accidentally bumped into my recording system. Alright, now that that is done, we will be getting some of our Mephiston red paint. which is also a base. And then we're going to be dry brushing this from the very edge of our blade all the way down to about 2/3 of its base. So I want to get a nice little glob here. And this is a pretty nice red. Now we're going to dry brush it on our dry palette and then save some of the red later on our wet palette. So we begin dry brushing here. In a way, it's almost like a stippling effect we're doing here, because you don't necessarily want to push against it. You kind of just want to dab on top of it. Now, I know all you young kids will be saying dab and take it into dabbing. You do whatever you want. Just gonna dry brush it a little more. As you can see, it's already starting to get a nice red tint, but you can still see the metal underneath, which is perfect. Let's get a little more red there. And as you see, upon closer inspection, it's already starting to get that nice sort of heated metal look, just with the Mephisto red we were using earlier. Now, with some of the red still on our brush and in our wet palette, we are going to create a sort of reddish orange to help blending it in. Kind of a weird semi-wet blend with dry blending. So we're going to use a little bit of our Troll Slayer Orange. Troll Slayer Orange layer paint. We're going to apply it to our red that we have on the brush still, and on our wet palette. So give it a very nice dark, almost sunset red. Then we'll be applying it even more to the edge of the blade. Because with heated metal, the brighter it gets to the core of the heat source is what we're going for. Especially on middle, because once we start applying the rest of our bright colors to give it that nice burn effect, we're actually going to go over with some black and stipple some here and there with the sponge to give it a nice crackling metal effect. Now with our reddish orange, we're actually going to dry brush sideways down the blade, right in the middle, as far as you can get into the middle as you can with your dry brush. Now with those two colors applied, it's already starting to form, and in all honesty, if you want a rusted looking weapon, you can actually leave it how it is right here and then maybe dry brush a little bit of bronze, speckle some bronze here and there. Maybe a little bit of orange that's brighter, give it a nice rusty effect. Now, clean our brush a little bit, and then get some pure, non-red mixed Troll Slayer Orange. Then we're going to apply it even further from the base starting. Give it a nice gradient of heated metal. We just want to dry brush some down into the middle as well, give it a nice defined look. It's already starting to take form pretty well. Now, with some of our brighter Troll Slayer Orange, on our dry brush we're actually going to get a little bit of a Flash Gets Yellow, which is a Citadel layer paint. And we're going to apply a little bit of that onto our brush. And we're going to dry brush it as well. Make sure you have just the perfect amount of this bright orange. This will be on the very edge of it, and also partially through the middle. dry brushing this weapon is so hard. I don't know why I just hold it from the actual wooden staff part. Okay. As that applied, it's now starting to get brighter and brighter from the base point of where this fire is coming from. Now we're going to get some of our bright yellow. We're going to stipple it at the very edge, like a dry brush stipple. Then down the center as well, a little bit down here on the blade part. Nice. On the next step, we're going to use just a pure Flash Gets Yellow, because it's very bright when it's not mixed with reds and oranges. We're going to apply it with a heavy dry brush, which means you still have a little bit of paint left on it, but not too much. We're going to be putting it at the very edge of the weapon here. Give it a nice, like, weird dry brush wet blend. And this is not the best, like, I'd say it's probably not the best way to do it, but it's a nice and simple way that won't take you hours and hours on end to execute how you want this to look like. I say it's a pretty dandy little effect. Now with that applied, with just a little bit of that yellow on your dry brush, you want to get a small amount of Corax White, which is a Citadel base paint, and apply it on the brush so that way we can finalize our nice burning heated weapon effect. Just apply it to the very, very edge of your weapon. And down through the middle. Just very lightly. Alright. Now clean off your brush. Make sure it's completely dry. And then we're going to get just a fresh, non-mixed Corax White and apply it to the very edge of our weapon. And down to the very bottom edges of it as well. And just lightly put some through the middle of your weapon as well. See what the edge is here. Now, you're going to get your small layer brush, as you see here. Put some of your Corax White on it. And use the very tip of your brush. And apply it to the ends and the tip of this weapon. Almost as if you're edge highlighting. Which you are. Now I did accidentally get some here onto my actual side, but if you dampen your brush a little bit, you can just get that off easily. Actually, you can even do a little bit of wet blending if you wanted it to be a smoother, crisper look while the paint is still drying. Alright. And there we are. We have our heated weapon at the very end. Now we're going to get started on the rest of the model, and even the base. For this step, we are going to be applying some of our base Wraithbone color onto the bone parts. And then we'll be slapping some Seraphim Sepia onto those parts once it is dried. Now while you have this glob of paint on your brush, just want to dip it into your water, just very, very lightly. So that way it can apply to the model a lot easier and thinner. Because when you thin your paint, you can actually have a smoother look, and through applying 2 coats, it can look just fine. In my case, if a little bit of black shows up underneath, because I'm not going to be doing 2 layers, that is alright. Wanted to have a nice little look to it. Give some to the hand here. The hand, on the other hand, I actually want to be the race bone color. Let's apply that gently to the hands, down here to the palm and the wrist, and onto that hand. Perfect. Now we're going to let that dry for about a minute, and then get started on applying the Seraphim Sepia. Alright, now that it's dry, we'll be getting some of our Seraphim Sepia and placing it on top of our model. Well, the race bone parts of our model. The reason why we're using this on top of the race bone is that way, unlike Corax White, race bone has this already tan look to it. So when you apply it, it would give it this nice bone color, like fresh bone that is clean look. Once it is dry. Alright, we're going to let that dry for a minute, and we'll get started on the actual body. Now, for the next part, that this is done drying, I also touched it up a little bit with some Abaddon Black onto the body to help clean up some of the dry brushing. We are going to be using Contrast Blood Angels Red and applying it to all the little tips on here, from the wraith itself and the base here, so we can start giving it our nice fire soul look to it. And this is a contrast paint, a red contrast paint, in fact. So it's going to blend in with our black very well, give it a nice like dark red sort of feel. And with me watering it down a little bit, it almost works as if it was a wash, instead of just a weird wash base. That's why I like contrast paints. They are both a wash, a shade, and a base paint, all wrapped up in one. And it's good for new beginners, even though it's oddly priced at being $8 per bottle. But in the right hands, you can actually make these little pots do a lot of work. Just using what's on hand, you can really make it effective. Let's get a little bit more on our brush. Apply to these parts here. And this will give us our nice defined foundation piece. So that way when we start dry brushing our Troll Slayer orange and a little bit of our orange yellow onto this, we will start seeing our nice glowing fire effect. Okay. Now that that is applied, we'll give it about 2 minutes to dry, and then we'll get started on our dry brushing. Alright, now that it's dry, we'll be getting some of our Troll Slayer orange, putting it onto our dry brush, putting a little bit on our dry palette, and then we're just going to dry brush all the parts here, and some of it onto the base to give it a nice little subtle glowing effect. We just want to catch all of the edges here. Now we'll just be dry brushing all of this onto here. We get about 2 goes, so that way we can get our nice bright, starting to get our nice bright blend here. As you see, with the dry brush going on here, we can really start seeing that nice subtle transition from blood red to our orange. And once we add a little bit of yellow into this orange, you'll get a very good blend later. Which is what we're going to do right now. You just want to get one part, as in just one brush dab, of your Troll Slayer orange. Then you want to get one dab of your Flash Gitz yellow. And we're going to mix the two together. This will give us a nice bright orange. Then we'll be dry brushing this onto the very lower parts of our miniature. Same with the ground here. Just try to brush to where you want the flames to have their glow. Okay, just about done. Dry brush some there. Dry brush a little bit here, and here, and there, and there, and there, and here. And then we want to use the same color we have here. Try to make it as dry on our brush as possible. We're going to lightly put some onto our cloak here, to help bring out the details while giving it also a very subtle glow, since fire is a very bright heat source. And the bigger the flame, the brighter our source. Just be brushing all over it. Now, the reason why I actually really enjoy dry brushing is because it is an easier way of easily highlighting your material, while also giving it a nice little bit of personality to it. Dry brushing works really good on these subtle glow effects, especially for beginners, but it also works really good on weapons, especially when you're making rust. Comes in handy. And there we are. One Spirit of Wrath complete. As you see, it has a lot of the detail done, has our very subtle glow effect, and hopefully this fellow manages to kill a few players. Nah, I'm kidding. I like the players in D&D. Other than that, you folks have a great day, and take care.